Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We still have a few people that are coming in, but I want to welcome everyone today to our virtual interviewing webinar. My name is Donna Gaynor. I am the director of the Career Services Office. Your mics should be muted as you come in, but please keep them muted throughout the presentation. We will have a chance to ask questions at the end of the presentation, but please, if you want to put your questions in the chat box at any time, we'll keep track of them. And then if you're still online, you can ask the question yourself, or we will read the question and for you and answer it. So we look forward to getting your questions. So feel free to add those into the chat box. Okay, so today, we're going to discuss something that is happening more and more, obviously, and that's virtual interviews. And what are virtual interviews? So a virtual job interview is an interview with an employer that is not conducted in person. You're not on the other side of the desk where you can see that person and shake their hand. It's in an online format. And there are two main types of virtual interviews. A live virtual interview, which can be conducted with an employer representative or representatives, maybe on the phone, but more commonly through an online video app like Zoom, like we're using, Skype, maybe Google Hangouts, or another platform that employers may have available. And then another type of virtual interview is a pre-recorded virtual interview. So the employer will send you a link through email, and you will record or pre-record your responses to the questions that they ask you as part of this process. So usually you'll get that email. They'll tell you you have a certain time frame to complete it. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a few days. They'll give you the questions. You usually have at least a couple of chances to, re-record the response if you're not happy with it, and then you'll send that through their online process. And so what they'll typically do is review that recorded interview and then get back to you with a live interview. We're going to focus mainly on the live virtual interviewing process. Why are we doing this? And of course, the pandemic has changed everything. It's severely restricted in-person contact. Employers are not visiting the campus at all. Their management is stating that they can't travel. They have restrictions on visitors at their facilities as well. And so it's much easier and much more safe and healthy to have a virtual interview. And even before the pandemic, a lot of employers were using virtual interviewing tools. The pre-recorded virtual interviewing tool was being used prior to the pandemic as a way to pre-screen candidates efficiently and in a cost-effective way. And a lot of employers, rather than fly someone out, to California to interview you, were doing Skype interviews very frequently. So it was something that was happening before, and I think it's going to continue to happen more and more. As a result of the pandemic, a lot of companies are shifting more and more to virtual workplaces. So your work is remote, and people are located all over the country and doing their work. And so they're, looking for candidates and looking for new employees who are comfortable in the virtual environment. And so the virtual interview is a way not only to effectively interview you, but see if you're going to be a good fit for their work environment. Okay, so we're going to talk about some main tips for how you can prepare for your virtual interview. So we'll talk a little bit about interviewing preparation in general, and then as it relates to the virtual platforms, we'll talk about making sure your technology is going to work, where you should be located, dress for success, body language in a virtual format, and also following up. All right. Okay, so preparing for a virtual interview, honestly, very much like an in-person interview as far as the important aspects, conducting research on the employer and the position. You're still going to be doing those basic things, making sure you understand the position that you're applying for, that you do your research on the employer, that you have some questions prepared for them, making sure you understand, things like their mission statement, their business, where you might be a good fit for that company. So the research still needs to be done. You still need to practice your interviewing skills. So practicing your behavioral interview questions, the commonly asked questions in advance using the STAR approach. We will have some links at the end of the presentation to resources that we have to help you prepare and practice your behavior interview questions. And of course, you should always feel free to schedule a mock interview with any one of us in the Career Services Office. And we also have opportunities to interview with employer representatives where you can not only practice the virtual presence part of it, but practice your responses to those questions. And so we encourage you to practice the STAR approach, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Some other things you should still be prepared with are any additional materials that they might ask for. So have your resume, any portfolios that maybe you have, or samples of work, your list of references, and just have them ready to potentially share as a file share during the virtual interview, or that you can easily email to them if they ask for it. So those types of documents, you should still be prepared to have those available as well. So we mentioned the STAR approach, and so some of you, if you've ever met with us before for interviewing or done any research, the STAR approach is a great way to help you prepare for the behavioral-based interview questions. Those are the types of questions where you're going to be asked things like, tell me about a situation, and how did you, give an example of a time where you were used this skill or worked in this type of position. So the STAR approach, which stands for situation, task, action, and result, is a great way to help you formulate your response. So you always want to think about the situation that you were in when you demonstrated the skill or behavior they're asking about. And they're going to ask you in these questions for sort of the main competencies that they are looking for that position and in general. So those are things like good communication skills, problem solving skills, conflict resolution skills, teamwork, leadership, as well as skills that are specific to the job. So in asking, tell me about a time when you've used Excel, for example, to create a report. And, thinking about the situation where you were in, the who, what, when, where, and why. Were you in a class? Were you at a job? What class was it? What was your role, which is the task? Explain the task that you had to complete or the problem you had to solve. And then the actions that you took, focus on you, the things that you did, and the results that you were able to achieve, and quantifiable results if possible. All right. So where you can provide a number, you increased sales, you were able to, you helped raise a certain amount of money, those types of things. And so, as I said, at the end of the presentation, there's a link with some questions and resources to help you practice that. But you're still going to be asked these kinds of questions even in the virtual environment. Okay. So our next tip was to test your technology. And, I think these days everybody's really familiar with Zoom and a lot of these different platforms because we are using them not only in our classes, but to have appointments with people and meetings with people. But it's still important to make sure you test the technology that the employer has asked you to use for the virtual interview. So if it's something new, make sure you download it and test it in advance. If you are not familiar with the software they're using, make sure you ask for it, and I'm sure they would provide it for you in advance so that you can download it and test it. And the things that you want to test are things like the audio on the platform, your webcam, your speakers, your microphone, all of those things. Test your internet connection wherever you're at if you're at home. and make sure that you have a good connection, and make sure if you're using your laptop or whatever device that your battery's charged or you are plugged into power so you don't lose your power. Close any streaming that you might have that might interfere with your internet connection. And if you have roommates that are using streaming, making sure that you have a good solid connection. And then another thing you may want to do is have a backup device ready, just in case there is a failure of some type. I had an appointment today with a student, and she was having problems with her audio, with her microphone, so she had to go to her phone to complete the appointment. So, it wasn't the best, but you want to make sure that you are prepared just in case something should happen. And you want to try to check this, of course, well in advance, just in case there is a problem that you might need to fix or take a little bit of time to fix. So test your technology is going to be important. Location and logistics. So location is referring, of course, to where you're going to be during the interview, but making sure that you are clear on the date and time of the interview, especially time zone. So, we're going to have, if we're in a virtual environment, your interviewer could be in California on Western time, on Pacific time, and you're at Eastern time. Make sure you understand the time of the interview. Make sure you log in a few minutes early. I know many of you did that today, and that's a great, that's good practice. Make sure you're early, just like you would want to be early to an in-person interview. Have your employer representative contact information available, just in case there's malfunctions on either end. Maybe their side of it disappears, or you have a power outage, or whatever the case may be. You should be able to contact them and let them know if there is any problems. So far as location, so it's important to have a location where you have a professional environment, as professional as you can. So clean, uncluttered background, have good lighting so that they can see your face, but not too much lighting. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Check what's behind you, okay? Make sure that you don't have like maybe a crazy looking poster behind you, or the window's open and it's really bright, or the door is open behind you and people are walking back and forth. So try to avoid distractions, try to keep it as plain as possible. You don't want to have a shelf full of clothes or some messy looking papers and things like that. Try to keep it nice and clean. The light should be behind you as much as possible to illuminate your face, or I'm sorry, behind the computer, not behind you. Behind the computer to illuminate your face. If it's in front of your face or behind your face, you may appear dark, okay, because the light will make your face appear dark. Same thing with windows. If you're going to have a window behind you, if it's really bright, that's going to wash you out as well. Now, what's nice with Zoom is you have the opportunity to use a virtual background. And if you're able to do that, that's a great way to eliminate any worry about how your background looks, but it should be professional in the sense that's not too busy or distracting. The nice thing that you can do is Florida Tech does provide some backgrounds that you can use that maybe have the Florida Tech logo or a picture of an area on campus. So that can be a great type of background to use. So things like that are a great way to keep your background plain but yet professional. No interruptions. So what's important is to make sure that anyone that's living with you, your roommates, friends, family, whoever is around, make sure they know and understand that you have an interview, you have an important meeting, and that you cannot be disturbed. And that means they shouldn't be walking around behind you. They shouldn't be deciding to do laundry in the room next to you, or just, start cooking their lunch while you're in the dining room doing your interview. You need to have a quiet area and a quiet space and no noise. Even if you have headphones in, it's still very distracting. So you need to have tell your the individuals who are living with you that you need to have that quiet time. If you have pets, you're going to have to try to make sure that they are going to stay away and not, I have a cat that likes to jump up in my lap when I'm working at home, and I would need to put her in a room so that she doesn't bother me. Silence your phone. Make sure that that's not going to go off, and any other loud devices. Now, what can happen in any type of event where you're, interviewing in a meeting? There's noises that you can't control because you're at home. So maybe your neighbor decides that they're going to start mowing their lawn, or there's a construction vehicle outside making a lot of noise, or somebody decides to come to your door and they won't stop knocking on the door. There's things like that that can happen. It's best to acknowledge it and just say, oh, I'm so sorry. My neighbor has decided to mow the lawn. I apologize for the noise. But don't get rattled, and don't ignore it. Just acknowledge it and draw attention to it. It might happen on the other end with the employer as well. I mean, they're often working from home as well. And so sometimes these things can happen. All right. How should you look? How should you dress? Well, you should dress the same as you would for an in-person interview, from head to toe. I know that I've heard, some people say, well, I just have to worry about the top. I don't have to worry, I can wear a dress shirt and a jacket and tie, and then I can have shorts on. It's best to dress like you would for a real interview. It'll make you feel more professional, number one. Also, what if you have to get up to answer the door or something like that? You want to make sure you still look good. Okay, and honestly, if you do have to get up, you should try to, obviously turn off your camera for a moment, and that would be unfortunate to do that. But you'll feel more professional if you are dressed from head to toe professionally. Now, the thing with a virtual interview, you're on camera, so there are some colors that don't look as good as others. So really bright colors can sometimes look strange, especially if you have a virtual background. You want to really be careful to check the colors and the patterns on your clothing. And really neutral or white colors, light colors, can sometimes wash out and not look as good. So jewel tones do look best if you're able to do that. And again, when you test how you look on camera, you can test some of those things. Busy patterns, as we mentioned, aren't always a good idea. And then the same guidelines for your appearance as for an in-person. You want to make sure your hairstyles are neat and look good. Minimal jewelry and makeup, all of those things should still be the same. You still want to look the part. You still want to look good. So as far as body language and eye contact, so this is a little different, when you're in the virtual environment, because often you're sitting in an area that may not be as professional as you would be when you're at someone's workplace. So if you can, use a chair, a desk type chair or a regular chair, and a desk or table, so that it is more like when you're in a real interview environment. If possible, don't sit on your bed or your couch even, because you tend to slouch when you sit in a chair like that. So sitting up, in a desk, at a desk with a table where you can have your computer. It's set up at the right level for you. You want to have your camera at eye level, and you want to look at the camera as you speak. And one thing you can do is kind of lean in. That shows interest, just like it does when you're in an actual interview. Try to stay relaxed, smile genuinely, and nod at, when they're talking, so that they can, you acknowledge that you're listening to them. And just like a regular interview, we want to, even though they might not be able to see your legs, you want to avoid, fidgeting with your leg, because it can kind of make your body move around. You don't want to cross your arms and look like you're not interested, or play around with your hair a lot, and those kinds of things. Again, try to just, sit up straight, look at the camera, maybe keep your hands on your lap if that helps you from, moving them around a little bit. But a great way to practice is just, practice with a friend perhaps, or we're always happy to practice virtual interviewing with you. And we can talk about all of those things. We can tell you, oh, your background looks a little messy. It's dark. You should probably try to have a little bit more light. We can help you with that. So we're happy to do that for you. So just some other tips for the virtual environment, some do's and don'ts. So make sure your camera is level with your face. So you're not getting cut off, or you're too close or too far back. Have your adequate lighting, as I said, making sure that it's behind the computer or behind the camera, not behind you. A clean background, not distracting, and a quiet environment, as we mentioned. So be careful with the angle of the camera, not to the ceiling. Don't cut off your head, obviously, that would not work very well. Have a busy or unprofessional background. So, that's something, if you're going to use a Zoom background, be careful with that. Don't have anybody around you. I know from experience, I've been in interviews where the person, had their family members walking around behind. It's very distracting. So try to, as we mentioned before, to make sure the people around you are aware of that. Do not be in your car. I know that we've had students attend some of our events, our virtual events, and they're in their car. You definitely don't want to do that for an interview. That's not a good idea. Or be on your bed, or where it's clearly that you're in a bedroom. Dark lighting, you want to make sure that you have some backlighting. You don't want to be so dark that it's hard to see your face. Okay, so these are just some do's and don'ts. We have some examples here of some things that you need to be aware of. All right, so our final tip for the virtual interview is following up. Just like you would for an in-person interview, you should send a thank you note to each interviewer if you had multiple interviewers within 24 hours. So you want to email that thank you note. One tip for a thank you note, it's nice because these representatives might be getting a lot of emails, and they might also have been interviewing a lot of people. So if you put in the subject line, thank you for the in this case internship interview, and your name, that really helps them go, oh, this was the interview I just had. So then maybe they'll be more likely to actually open that message. And just, some of the tips, same thing for an in-person interview: express appreciation, thank them for the opportunity, reiterate your interest in the position, remind them of the important skills and the qualifications that make you a good candidate for the position. If you needed to provide any additional information, perhaps they asked for the list of references, or if they asked for anything else, like a transcript or something like that, you can provide that. And then it's nice if you have a good LinkedIn profile, you can add a link to your LinkedIn, or if you have an online or a portfolio or a website that you can share with them. Okay. So we wanted to tell you that we have an opportunity for you to practice your virtual interviewing skills. Enterprise Holdings, which is the parent company of Enterprise Rent-A-Car, is holding some mock interviews, virtual mock interviews on Tuesday, next Tuesday from 1 to 4 p.m. And you can schedule an appointment to do that by going to the appointment function on Handshake, just like if you were going to schedule an appointment with us. You can go and schedule an appointment with the Enterprise Holdings representative for a virtual mock interview. Now, I will say that they typically recruit students who are interested in working at their management training program. So typically those are business majors, communication majors, psychology majors, but any major who's interested in management training is eligible for those jobs. So those are the types of students they're preferring to see for their mock interview program. But if you are a different major and you would really like to schedule a mock interview, please feel free to do that. you can always schedule an interview with us, a mock interview with one of the career advisors. So that's available anytime for you. But definitely if you are a business major, communications major, psychology, or humanities, definitely take a look at next Tuesday afternoon as a time that you can practice your interviewing skills. Okay, so here is a list of resources that are available, some websites that are available. So the effective interviewing, this is on our career services website. We talk about the STAR approach on that website, so you can find that at fit.edu/career. Maybe Maria, if you're free, maybe you could put some of those links in the chat box for the students.
Yeah, I'll be happy to add them. Yep.
Thank you. How to make a good impression in a virtual interview. That's a handshake article that, you know, because we're seeing so many virtual interviewing opportunities these days. Practice and preparation for an online job interview is another great article. And budget-friendly ways to appear professional while working or interviewing from home, from our Career Fair Plus partners that provided the platform for the virtual career expo we just hosted. So there's some kind of good little tips there on how to look your best on a budget in a virtual environment, and not only just the interviewing, but working from home as well. And so hopefully as you guys move forward in your careers, as more and more of the jobs are probably going to be remote and virtual, these will be some great tips for you moving forward as well. Okay, so that is pretty much it for our presentation. You have our contact information here. So let's take a look here and see if we have any questions. I don't see any questions yet. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question? If you could just maybe type it in the chat box. No questions? Or if someone would like to ask a question, if you want to unmute your microphone for a moment, just say your name. No questions? Okay. Oh. All right. So, and Natalie, I don't know if you wanted to ask the question yourself, or unmute your microphone to ask it. Okay. All right. Do you want me to address this to the group, Natalie? Okay, so Natalie asked a question about dealing with anxiety during an interview. A lot of people have that. It's a very common response. You know, you're very, especially these days when, you know, we're anxious about a lot of things. So a lot of us are dealing with, you know, just the anxiety of online classes and not sure what's going to happen next and in the world and all of those things. It's really a tough time. So with interviewing, because it's such an important thing that you're trying to, you know, you're trying to get that job or trying to get that internship that's going to help you in your career. I think one of the best ways to deal with that is to be prepared for your interview. So do as much preparation in advance. So do your research, practice your questions. I would definitely recommend that you schedule one, if not more, mock interviews with career services staff or with an employer rep if there's an employer rep that's providing some feedback. Practice is really going to help with your anxiety because you will feel more prepared and you'll feel more confident. So that is probably the best piece of advice I can give you, is to be prepared and to practice. But there are also some other things that you can do. You can practice, you know, deep breathing before you actually have the interview to try to calm yourself down and to relax. You know, those are some things you can also do to prepare, but practicing is really going to help with that, Natalie. But that's a great question, because I think that many people are anxious when they have an interview, because especially if you haven't done many of them. So that's a great question. So Jasir asked, as an international student, what will be helpful for the interview in addition to the tips? Well, I think as an international student, one thing that you should do is be prepared to talk about your status and be able to clearly state, and this is for an interview with for a job in the United States. So be able to tell them, I am on OPT, I will have authorization to work for 1 year or up to 3 years, or whatever your situation is. That's going to be very important. Also, you're depending on your English language skills. If you have good communication skills in English, that's great, but some of you may need to practice that so that you are, so that the employers can understand you. And the virtual environment can sometimes make that a little bit more difficult. So I would also recommend practicing that, Jasir, with advisors as a way to prepare. So we're getting some good questions here. Irma, do you want to ask the question yourself? Or if you do, you can unmute your mic if you want to. If not, okay, everybody wants, that's no problem. So Irma asks, if you get stuck answering a question, what should you do? So if you don't know the answer to the question, the best way to handle that is to say something like, you know, I'm not sure, I've never been in that situation before, so I'm not sure how to answer this question. However, I will research the topic and I will get back to you with my answer. That's one way that you can do it. Another way that you can do it is, again, to say, I've never been in that situation, but if I was in the situation, I would do these certain things. So those are a couple of ways that you can handle that, Irma. You don't want to just say, I don't know. You just want to say, you know, I've never been in that situation. I haven't taken a class in that area, so I'm not sure how I would answer this, but I will definitely research the topic, and if I get this job, those are the types, if I don't know something, I will definitely ask questions and research it, and I learn very quickly, and I'm sure I will be able to come up to speed very fast in that area. So you want to spin it around to a positive, and just not say, I don't know. Tell them how you would find out, how you would learn about that. Okay, Allison, you have a question about behavioral questions. Did you want to ask it yourself?
I do. Hello.
Hello.
So Allison Mackenzie James here, and I struggle with behavioral questions. And I'd like to know what is an effective way to address the STAR method, and how will I know what direction the interviewer may be headed beforehand?
All right, so one way, I'll go to the final question first. How would I know what direction they might be headed? The best way to understand what they might ask or what is important to them is to look for the qualifications on the initial job description that you applied to. So if, for example, if the job description says you must have excellent customer service skills, and the job description talks a lot about customer service, it's very likely they're going to ask a question about how do you handle, for example, a difficult customer. Give me an example of great customer service that you've provided in your past jobs, or something like that. So that's one way you can kind of tell what direction they may be headed. And then as far as the STAR approach, what's important is to think about the 4 letters there: situation, task, action, result. So in the example of, give me an example of a time where you've had to deal with a difficult customer, STAR would be, situation will be, when I worked at specific company, specific place. You know, when I worked at Target as a cashier, my task was to check out customers on a regular basis. Part of the situation will be the difficult customer that you dealt with. I had a customer who came in who was very angry that we didn't have the items on sale anymore. And she was becoming very aggressive with me and raising her voice. And the action that I took was to pull her aside, contact my manager, to calm her down and take her out of, the view of the other customers. And as a result, my manager was able to take care of the situation, came back to me and told me that I'd handled it very well. So you give them the actual situation you were in, what you were doing, the actions you took, and the results of those actions. What often happens in that type of, when people are asked a question like that, how do you handle a difficult customer? Many times people will say, oh, that happens all the time in my job, and I just try to be as nice as possible and calm the customer down, and it usually works well. But you're not being specific. So Allison, try to be specific as it relates to the situation, how you handled the situation, and the result. That's why we recommend that you practice or think about this in advance, because then you can think of these situations in advance. And if you look at the job description and it tells you, oh, customer service is important, good communication skills are important, problem solving, those kinds of things are important, prepare with those types of commonly asked questions.
Right, and have maybe a lineup of 2 or 3 that could, that might relate.
Absolutely,
to,
yes, yes. And
thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And the resource we provided on our website does have some of those commonly asked questions to help you practice. And also you can go online, like do a Google search, and there's all kinds of examples that you can practice.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. And Shubhata, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Do you want to ask your own question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is Shibda. And yeah, no problem. So my question was like, what kind of question should we ask of our prospective employer? In the sense, like, obviously we know not to ask questions which are which we could easily get over the internet.
Right.
But more deeper questions like what, like I'm a behavior analyst, and I would be working with, say, students with autism.
Mm-hmm.
So I would want to know more deeper stuff like what is their their philosophy of how they work with their students, and how to frame this so as not to sound threatening, but yet it is important,
I think
this information. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think it depends on how much they share with you in advance. First of all, they may provide that information to you, but yeah, certainly that is something you could ask by just saying, what is your philosophy for treating students in this situation, if that's not brought up, or some other, anything that is, like you were saying, you don't want to make it sound like you're criticizing what they do in any way, but if in your case, yes, I think some of those kinds of questions would be appropriate if they are not brought up as part of the interview process. That might be something they ask you, for example. And then I would also make sure you do your research so you do understand that some of that is available for you. But some other types of questions that are often good to ask are just things, what is the typical career path for someone in this position? How often do you provide feedback? What type of training is provided? Those kinds of things. That's typically what we recommend. But it does depend on the situation, obviously, and the type of job, like you stated.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's, as long as you frame it in a positive way, like you were kind of stating, you don't want to make it seem critical in any way, but just more, asking in general for those kinds of things.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And Jasir asked, do you recommend getting OPT before the interview? So OPT is something handled by the International Student Services Office, and you do need to apply within a certain time frame. It's possible that you may have an interview before you actually have the OPT, but so that is something that you definitely need to ask the International Student Services office this year. All right. Obviously, you need to have the OPT before you can work, but it just depends on the interview process whether or not you would have the time to get it finalized. Allison, tell me about yourself. Okay. So what order should the response be in, present, past? So Allison, for the tell me about yourself, it should be focused on the position. Okay, so what you, and feel free if you want to unmute to follow up in any way. So it should be, if the job you're applying for is a management training job, you need to provide information that is relevant to that job. So I'm a student at Florida Tech studying business administration, and I have experience in working at the university in the food service areas, and I am an athlete, varsity athlete in the crew team or something like that. So you don't need to tell them I was born here and I grew up there and I went to high school here and there. Keep it fairly present, but if past information is relevant, you can bring that in. And then as far as the future goes, it needs to be if you're going to mention what your goals are, they need to be targeted to that position. Does that help?
It does. What if you are in the midst of a career change and you don't really have anything that's relevant, but you have transferable skills?
You can bring up the transferable skills. I think it's appropriate for a career changer. I would assume what is your major here?
Organizational leadership.
Okay, so you could say I'm a current student in organizational leadership at Florida Tech, and I have extensive experience, past experience in whatever your past is, and then turn it around to what you want to do in the future. So talk about those transferable skills, but then how that relates to the position you're applying to.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. And oh yes, what is your weakness? So you want to think about something that you, a skill, it may be a personality trait, but you want to be careful with that. Something that you are working on, something that that you recognize as a weakness and that you are working to improve. So we want to stay away from bad weaknesses such as and personal types of things like, I have a hard time getting up in the morning, so my weakness is I'm always late. That's not a good thing to share with an employer, obviously. But if you wanted to talk about time management, say I have sometimes I have difficulty managing my time and I become stressed when I'm completing projects, but I recognize that and I am currently improving in that area by making a strict schedule to follow so that I complete my projects on time. Always make sure that your weakness is something that you can say that you are working on, that you're improving in that area, and demonstrate that you are taking steps to improve. Does that help? Thank you. Okay. Wow, some very interesting questions here. And I would say if you do have like really specific types of questions, you may want to schedule an actual appointment with someone, because then we can be a little bit more focused on your particular situation. And the way that you do that is on this screen here, you can go to Handshake, and in the Career Center section, you can make an appointment with one of us. All right, is there any other questions? It looks like probably our time. Oh, we're doing pretty good there. Maria, are there any other questions that I missed?
No, you're good. I know Victor was having issues with making the appointment for Enterprise for next week.
Okay.
So feel free to also contact us to either the career fit.fit.edu email, or you can email me directly, and I'll be happy to help you and schedule it for you if you have any issues.
Okay,
But other
great.
than that, we should be good. So everyone
Okay.
should be okay.
All right, great. Thank you, Maria. I see one more thing here. Okay, great. Okay, well, I'm glad that you all found this useful. Again, you can certainly contact us, as Maria said, anytime. Our email here is career@fit.edu. If you do have a question, or if you would like to schedule an appointment, go to Handshake, and we'd be happy to spend a little bit more time with you individually with your questions. All right, well, thanks so much for attending, everyone, and thanks for the great information and great questions. We appreciate it. All right, take care.